This is HuffPost Live. I'm Mike Sachs. 40 years ago today, the Supreme Court established a woman's fundamental right to obtain an abortion. The decisions, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, were supposed to settle the issue, but instead inflamed a debate over reproductive rights that rages to this day. Often lost amid the abortion wars, though, are the stories of Roe and Doe themselves. In the years since the decision, both women, real names Norma McCorvey and Sandra Cano, have become pro-life activists. But how they got there, starting more than 4 decades ago with their involvement in the cases that came out of their real lives, are very different. Joining us in the Google Hangout to tell her story, we have Sandra Cano, who, as a plaintiff, was known as Mary Doe, and Dr. Ryan Malphurs, a trial consultant and author of Rhetoric and Discourse in the Supreme Court Oral Arguments. Malphurs has been interviewing Sandra and Norma in preparation for a book on Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton and its relationship to their lives and, well, our lives. Sandra, thank you very much for making the time to join us today.
Thank you for wanting me to be here.
And I first want to just lay out some of the complexities, some of the details of how your involvement began. At some point, I know in 1970, you fled pregnant from Georgia to Oklahoma and didn't return until a few months later for fear of actually getting an abortion. The baby girl you ultimately had, we'll call her Baby Doe. She was born, and you gave her up for adoption. Your lawyer at the time, Margie Pitt-Hames, she was working on finalizing your divorce and working to regain custody of the children that you had with the man you were trying to divorce. His name was Joel Lee Bensing. And you were under the understanding that you were part of a women's rights case, but beyond that, to what extent, it just kind of remained unclear. But it was only after the Supreme Court decision that you learned that you were even part of the case. That's something that came pretty surprising to me. So you've never had an abortion. You never meant to be part of this case. So in this whole process leading up to the decision, and when you found out about the decision 40 years ago, did you ever feel lied to or deceived?
Yes, I know I was lied to and deceived for the simple reason when I went to the legal aid to see about getting a divorce and to get my 2 children out of foster care, I wasn't aware that by doing this, I was going to become a plaintiff in an abortion issue that wound up to be companion case to Roe v. Wade.
And at the time, when you did give up your child upon having Baby Doe, and you learned that you were part of the case, where did your mind go? What did you think when the decision came down?
I had a heavy weight on my shoulders. My mom and stepdad at the time, they was in the bedroom, and they were ecstatic. They were saying, "You won, you won." And I'm thinking, what have I won? And I wasn't aware of Roe v. Wade. I carried the burden that I was part of abortion, but to what extent or the details, I had no knowledge. But I've carried a heavy weight all these years.
And how old were you, Sandra, when that happened?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, and 22 years later, you came out as Mary Doe. And in doing so, you reconnected with 3 of your children, including Baby Doe herself. And her name is Melissa, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when Melissa came back to you, how did that make you feel?
Well, I was overjoyed because how else, in life, when you give a child up, you're expecting to never see that child again. And then when you have that blessing and that opportunity, it's just something that it's hard to explain. It's just, I was really overjoyed.
And another son, or another child, your son Joel Lee Jr., also came back into your life. So with Melissa and with Joel Lee Jr., where are they now?
Well, Melissa, I have no idea. It's a sad, sad case because of, I call Melissa my Supreme Court baby. Because of her, the only son I've ever had, he's in prison.
And why?
Because Melissa, the family that adopted her, it's a long, long story. There was motives of murder that went on there, not just through the circumstances that involved my son being in jail. My son didn't commit a crime, but he was convicted party to a crime. 10 years later, Melissa's out walking the streets along with adoptive sister that was in that family. And it's just a long, long story. But anyway, my son, he got life, and we're praying that he's got a tentative parole date coming up in June. And I'm praying that God lets him come home.
And in that long, long story, I do want to flush out some of the details just to hear about how Melissa was part of your life and what she ultimately did to your life. So could you explain just a little bit about how Joel ended up in prison and how Melissa is out of your life?
Well, Melissa came back into the picture. She found me, and she come searching for me, and she found me. And I'm thinking she's finding us because she wants to be part of our life. She wants a family, even though she had adopted family, that she was wanting to be involved with us. That's why she was looking for us. During all this sad, sick situation, she had other motives. Her walk was not the way it should be. It was not the way I would have taught her, regardless of the circumstances. Melissa, she wound up, I found out she and my son had been having an incest relationship. They had met, and they never knew they were brother and sister. Then when the news article come out and it was stated that they were brother and sister, Melissa didn't want to stop it at that, and she's very devious. I love Melissa as a child, but I don't like Melissa because of the evil walk that she chose to do and the things she's done. And even though she's done all these things, I don't want to put a damper that she shouldn't have been brought into this world because of the evil. I'm happy she was given life. I'd do it all over again. But she chose the path she took.
For many people listening to this, that's quite a surprising answer that you have, quite a surprising thought you have. This is someone who came into your life and, as you had told me before, wrecked your life as you knew it. And not once have you thought then that if you could go back 40 years ago, that you have made a different decision when in figuring out whether to have the child or not.
Well, there's not a decision to be made. Automatic, you're pregnant, you're going to have the baby. The decision's to be made after you have the baby. You give it life. If you think that for the best health of the child and the reason, if you can't take care of that child, the option is adoption, because there's thousands of families out there that can't have children, would take that baby and love it and care for it.
In your story, it brings up points of desperation, moments of weakness, but yet a steadfast belief in the sanctity of life. But there are many people in this country, millions, just as there are millions like you, who believe that ultimately the decision on whether to have a child comes down to the woman and her doctor. So on this day, 40 years after the decision, what would you tell women who believe just as strongly in the miracle of children, but believe otherwise when it comes to whether or not it is the woman's choice to have the child itself?
Well, I believe that we have the right, and it should be an understanding. It's okay for us to agree to disagree, but my stance is it's wrong to take a child's life, any circumstance.
Yeah, so in it's being wrong to agree to disagree, there's a recognition of humanity that I hear from you that we don't often hear from people on either side of the abortion debate. So when you talk to people on your side and on the other side when you're talking about really your life. When you're talking about what your life has created in American history. You know, are you able to tell others, allies or enemies, hey, you know, let's at least listen to each other. Let's see each other's humanity. If this is not just a social issue but a religious issue, that we should be able to recognize each other as humans. Do you see that missing from the debate that has emerged in the last several decades?
I think, like I said before, we all agree to disagree. We're all going to have different views, but each person has to live with their own view. And, you know, right from right and wrong from wrong. And my decision is that, you know, once that you've conceived, you have no choice. The baby has a right to have a choice and it can't speak for itself. That's where we come. We have to stand up because it's not fair to take an unborn child's life because we made a mistake for the sins of the mother and the father. And it's not right that that child have to die because the parents weren't ready at that time. That child had nothing to do. It was brought in it was conceived. And why should it have to suffer? A child should be allowed the right to life.
And you were mentioning before how when you're with your family when the Roe and Doe decisions came down 40 years ago, and your mother and stepfather celebrated. They said, "You won, you won." Did they know what the case was about? Did they know and have a position at that time on abortion rights?
Well, my mom was very closely connected to Margie as far as communication.
And Margie was your lawyer, right?
She was attorney at that time. And with Margie, we never discussed abortion. The only thing that was ever asked of me, what was my stand on it? And people have to understand, I do care. But back then, when you're in a survival state, your life is unstable, the world's just crashing down, you're just trying to survive. I told her I didn't care what somebody else wanted to do. I did not believe in abortion. But I do care because there's a baby there that we're destroying its life, and it's something we all should care because there's other options. There's so many different decisions that could be made differently. But like I said, we all agree to disagree, and I'm sure a lot of people's not going to agree with me, but that's my heart and soul, and I would go to my death standing strong that it's wrong to have an abortion.
Well, Sandra, as you're talking, we have people in the comments section who are engaging with what you're saying. And we have Laura Henri who writes, "I am pro-life, but for myself. For everyone else, it's your own choice. I think, yes, it's murder. But I wouldn't want to tell you how to live and what to do with your own body." And so that sounds a little bit like what you're saying, maybe a little bit more leeway for the pro-choice side. And we also have Joanne Kennedy saying, "I am pro-choice, as I believe that women's health care is an uphill battle. I fight for my daughter's medical health care rights. A woman's choice is between her and her doctor." So even here, right, we're seeing people engage with each other, engage with you, and that this conversation here and debate, fiery debate elsewhere, still rages. Now, Ryan, I want to go to you. You've decided to tell the story. Tell Sandra's story. And we've heard Norma's story a good amount, too, and I'd like you to recount that as well. And what makes these women, who both are on the pro-life side 40 years after a decision in their name created and really established the pro-choice side as the law of the land, what makes them different women in your views?
I think what's been intriguing to me in looking at both of their stories is how human both women are, in the sense of the difficulties that they struggle with. They lack a clear ideology and their willingness to accept others that hold a different perspective from them. And their stories are both quite fascinating. Sandra started out and became involved in a case that she never anticipated being involved in. Norma started out pro-choice, and then changed and moved over to the pro-life side in 1995 and has been with that side since then. And she's also a very complicated woman. Part of the story for both women that intrigues me is how most Americans lack a clear picture. While we think of pro-choice and pro-life in ideological camps, both women are human, and they're both dynamic, and they both deviate from ideological norms, so to speak, on both sides of the camps. And that's been fascinating to me, to hear the human side of both of their stories and to see them less as political figures and more as human and complex actors in a very rich narrative.
Now, we tried to get Norma here as well today, but she's proven difficult to get a hold of for media interviews. Is there any reason why that's the case?
Norma has spent a considerable amount of time dealing with interviews and dealing with the media, and I think she's a little burned out, and she also has felt at times that she's not always in control of her story when she turns to the media. So she's very careful about who she speaks to, when she speaks to people, and it's important for her to be in charge of the message that she wants to provide, I think.
Now, along with your book that hopefully will be coming out soon, I've read parts of it already in advance, and it's you really have some wonderful things you say in it. There is a story by a Joshua Prager from Vanity Fair about Norma McCorvey. We have it in our resource well. It's coming out in the upcoming issue of Vanity Fair. I want to turn back to Sandra for a moment. We have Foxy Shazam in our comments. I want you to hear this. Writing, I think part of our problem when it comes to issues like abortion is we are so involved with other people's lives. If we focused on ourselves and ignored what our neighbors do, we would all be better off. But really, Sandra, do we live in a society? Do you want to live in a society where we're not looking out also for our neighbors and for society as we wish it to be?
Well, first of all, I don't go into other people's lives. I stand for my views and from my heart, what I'm led to say and do. That doesn't mean I'm forcing somebody to listen to me. I'm not forcing them. You've got to do the way I think. I'm trying to show my heart, my soul. I'm trying to show Sandra Cano. I'm trying to tell a story, get my story out with truth instead of lies, fraud, and deceit. I'm not out to hurt anyone. I'm not out to name call. I'm only out to get the truth out, and my stand is 100% for life. I've come near death twice myself, so I know how precious life is now, even more so. And, like I said, all I can do is show people who I am, tell them my story. And Sandra Cano is not Dovey Bolton. My name should not be on that case. It was not my want, desires, or belief. I never sought to be on that case. That's what is frustrating to me. I'm not political. I'm not trying to get out here and change the world. If I can take care of me and my family, I think I'm doing well right now, because life's always been a struggle. It's probably going to be a struggle till I die. But I don't want the world believing I believe something that I don't. And abortion is something I've never believed in. My name should not be connected to Dovey Bolton or abortion in any way. So that's what I'm trying to get out there. My heart is wrong. Abortion kills. And I don't want the blood on my hands of an innocent baby. Because I would not be here today talking to anybody if that had never crossed my mind during my lifestyle and everything over the years. If I had believed in abortion and I had took my baby's life, would I ever been reunited with the two daughters that I gave up for adoption? I've had that. God has blessed me that I was able to be reunited with both. So all I'm just trying to do, clear my name. I'm not connected to abortion. I've never believed in it, and my name should not be up there. That's just what I'm trying to do, is get the truth out.
And Ryan, Sandra did try to clear her name legally, at least, earlier this decade, almost 10 years ago, I believe.
That's right. She and one of her attorneys have petitioned the Supreme Court to both have Roe and Doe overturned, and the Supreme Court denied that motion to hear the case. As one of the only parties connected in the case, Sandra is in the unique position to challenge that directly, as I understand it, legally. And the Supreme Court has continued to refuse to hear her case, which is not surprising necessarily, but it makes her situation, I believe, all the more frustrating to her.
And in interviewing both women, Ryan, what did you find about your own views when it comes to abortion? Sandra seems to be quite a bridge builder here. She doesn't seem interested in the divisiveness of the issue, whereas I know Norma is more front lines and is very much, when it comes to abortion, at least from what I've read, much more of an outspoken, in the open activist. So, did you have an agenda that you were trying to make clear in your working on this story and interviewing them?
When I reached out to both women, I made it clear that I was pro-choice, and I have always been pro-choice, and that I'm a liberal and a Democrat. And I wanted to get that out in the open because typically those are elements and characteristics that would scare them off first. So I wanted them to be aware of it immediately, so they knew I was being honest and upfront with them. And then we went ahead and talked about how we could tell their story and how I was more interested in their human story rather than the political story, to where I did not personally have an agenda, but I wanted to provide a background to their life story, essentially. Now, it came at a very unusual time for myself. At the time when I began interviewing the women, my wife became pregnant with our daughter, who was born in October. And as I have been writing and speaking and interviewing with these women, it has been an unusual emotional, ethical, and moral journey for myself as I'm watching my daughter grow and develop. It has not changed my stance. I think that more than ever, I'm probably pro-choice, and know that with the difficulties that go into giving birth, it's important that a woman is committed to that choice and committed to ensuring that she's willing to take care of a healthy fetus and a healthy baby. My concern is that if you do not have that commitment or desire to do so, then the child and the fetus is going to suffer. And I've seen instances in which women have tried to use medication or illegal drugs to have an abortion. And the abortion did not occur, and they ended up giving birth to the child and the fetus. And it's a difficult situation. But Sandra and I have been able to have these discussions, and we respect one another's viewpoint, and we agree to disagree. We agree on some issues, and we disagree on others. And for both of us, that's okay. We can be friends, and we can work together on this project. And I've enjoyed my time speaking with such an amazing historical figure.
I hope you heard that right, Sandra.
I highly respect Ryan.
So we have a comment from Marissa Emily saying, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, no one wants an abortion. Education is key to preventing abortion. So speaking of education, Sandra, can you give us a little lesson from life of the last 40 years? What's your life philosophy now, broader? What have you learned about yourself, about the world, in the 40 years since the decision came down?
We live in a very dysfunctional world. That is guaranteed. But one thing, I stand more for life today. I'm more humble towards others to reach out I don't close the door on someone that doesn't believe the way I believe. I feel like, like me and Ryan discussed, we agree to disagree, but we can still be friends. But who knows? I might soften somebody's heart that does believe in abortion. But I stand strong. But I'm not going to ever give up. That's my belief till death, that it's wrong. And like I said, I just want to clear my name. I should not be on Doe. I don't want to go through all these years longer if I'm blessed with another 10 or 20 years. I don't want to be known as Sandra Cano, Dovey Bolton, a plaintiff in abortion. I just want to be me and believe, like I believe that it's wrong to take a baby's life, and I'll do that till I die. And I just pray that I can change hearts.
And Ryan, you didn't only talk to Sandra and Norma, you also tried to find their lawyers, correct?
Correct.
And were you able to find their lawyers and get comment?
I have been unable to get comments from either Sarah Weddington or Linda Coffey, who are the main attorneys for Norma McCorvey. And unfortunately, Marjorie Pitt Hames died in 1996, I believe. And I've been unable to locate anyone who would be willing to speak with me about it. But if anyone does or can point me in the right direction, I'm happy to speak with them. I'd like to hear their stories and include them as well. Originally, the idea of the book was to capture all of the women involved in Roe and Doe, because it's unusual to have such a large number of women involved in Supreme Court cases. Obviously, the issue of abortion makes perfect sense for them to be involved, but it would make for a fantastic story to be able to capture all of them.
Sandra, I take it you're taking care of a couple of your grandbabies today?
Well, I've raised them from birth. I have a 22-year-old, he's autistic, and then I have another one that's he's learning disabilities. He's 16, and I've had them both from birth. And my oldest grandson, my daughter was going to abort him. I flew to Texas, and I brought him home when he was a week old. And even though we've had a lot of hard travels together, and it's been a struggle, he's been the most blessing both these children have in my life, that I'm so grateful to God that I was trusted to raise these children, even though it's been a hard road. But they've been the greatest joy.
Well, Sandra, as they say down south, bless your heart. I believe I'm saying that right, huh?
Thank you.
All right. Well, Sandra, Ryan, thank you guys for joining today. We'll have more segments about the 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade here on HuffPost Live, where the conversation will continue. Decision that you learned that you were even part of the case. That's something that came pretty surprising to me. So you've never had an abortion. You never meant to be part of this case. So in this whole process leading up to the decision, and when you found out about the decision 40 years ago, did you ever feel lied to or deceived?
Yes, I know I was lied to and deceived for the simple reason when I went to the legal aid to see about getting a divorce and to get my two children out of foster care, I wasn't aware that by doing this, I was going to become a plaintiff in an abortion issue that wound up to be companion case to Roe v. Wade.
And at the time, when you did give up your child upon having baby children, including baby Doe herself, and her name is Melissa, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when Melissa came back to you, how did that make you feel?
Well, I was overjoyed because how else, I mean, in life, when you give a child up, you're expecting to never see that child again. And then when you have that blessing and that opportunity, it's just something that it's hard to explain. It's just, I was really overjoyed.
And another son, or another child, your son Joe Lee Jr., also came back into your life. So with Melissa and with Joe Lee Jr., where are they now?
Well, Melissa, I have no idea. It's a sad, sad case because
Taking the time to join us today.
thank you for wanting me to be here.
And I first want to just lay out some of the complexities, some of the details of how your involvement began. At some point, I know in 1970, you fled pregnant from Georgia to Oklahoma and didn't return until a few months later for fear of actually getting an abortion. The baby girl you ultimately had, we'll call her Baby Doe, she was born and you gave her up for adoption. Your lawyer at the time, Margie Pitt-Hames, she was working on finalizing your divorce and working to regain custody of the children that you had with the man you were trying to divorce. His name was Joel Lee Bensing. And you were under the understanding that you were part of a women's rights case, but beyond that, to what extent, it just kind of remained unclear. But it was only after the Supreme Court and you learned that you were part of the case, where did your mind go? What did you think when the decision came down?
I had a heavy weight on my shoulders. My mom and stepdad at the time, they was in the bedroom and they were ecstatic. They were saying, "You won, you won." And I'm thinking, what have I won? And I wasn't aware of Roe v. Wade. I carried the burden that I was part of abortion, but to what extent or the details, I had no knowledge, but I've carried a heavy weight all these years.
And how old were you, Sandra, when that happened?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, and 22 years later, you came out as Mary Doe. And in doing so, you reconnected with three of your... This is HuffPost Live. I'm Mike Sachs. 40 years ago today, the Supreme Court established a woman's fundamental right to obtain an abortion. The decisions, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, were supposed to settle the issue, but instead inflamed a debate over reproductive rights that rages to this day. Often lost amid the abortion wars, though, are the stories of Roe and Doe themselves. In the years since the decision, both women, real names Norma McCorvey and Sandra Cano, have become pro-life activists. But how they got there, starting more than 4 decades ago with their involvement in the cases that came out of their real lives, are very different. Joining us in the Google Hangout to tell her story, we have Sandra Cano, who, as a plaintiff, was known as Mary Doe, and Dr. Ryan Malphurs, a trial consultant and author of Rhetoric and Discourse in the Supreme Court Oral Arguments. Malphurs has been interviewing Sandra and Norma in preparation for a book on Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton and its relationship to their lives and, well, our lives. Sandra, thank you very much for making